I'm proud. Murph, we have two guests today, two esteemed guests.
A whole new generation of Daydream Cast hosts, which is to say one returning character and one whole new character.
Yeah, Will's been here multiple times. I think after, like, at your third time, you're like family at this point. It's like, we're not giving you the good guest sheets. You get the room down the hall. It's good to see you, Will.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here and talk games in a way that is so structured and so thoughtful. So thank you for having me.
Oh, and then we have the newcomer, Ronny Berryer from IGN.
I am happy to hear that I'm 1/3 of a family. It's just like how I grew up.
Your punch card will come in the mail.
Oh my goodness. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ronny.
Yeah, as you said, I work at IGN in the guides department. I'm a video producer there, so helping people through fun things like Elden Ring and stuff like that, and making fighting game content whenever I can swing it.
How does one, I guess Will can also answer this question, because I don't remember we asking him, but how does one get themselves into games journalism? Does it just start with liking games, or does it start with liking journalism?
I'm going to let Ronny go first.
So speaking for myself, I kind of backed into a different way. I didn't do the games journalism freelance. I did the actual, like, field production freelance. So I cut my teeth filming weddings and banquets and events and a bunch of corporate stuff like that. Got a media production degree from the University of Houston, which, while was good practice, has done absolutely nothing for my career. But I did answer a casting call. So I got some really good advice from actually formerly of GameSpot, Danny O'Dwyer on Twitter. Everyone always asks, how do you break into an industry like this? And he said, whatever you're doing, have a portfolio ready, and then be willing to fly somewhere. And I was like, okay, I could do one of those. Hopefully the time is right for the second one. So I shot a lot of stuff, got what I thought was a pretty good production reel together. And then actually CJ Gibson, who used to be at IGN, used to be my boss, put out a call on Twitter, I think in 2018, saying, hey, we need production assistants for Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. If you can fly here in the next week, like, let's talk about it. So I DM'd him, and thankfully my wonderful wife at the time was willing to let me do that. My job at the time let me take a few days off to go basically audition for another job, which, how many people get that fortunate? And was able to fly to Comic-Con, make myself useful, and eventually angle that into a full-time job with IGN.
So you had the skills, and then you saw the opportunity, and you took it. That's awesome.
Yes, I kicked that door down, and no one's pushing me out.
Yeah. Will, what was your advice or your thoughts on this?
My path is very different from Ronny. So I studied writing, creative writing specifically in college, and at the same time, I also posted on the GameSpot forums, and I became very well known on the GameSpot forums. Specifically on System Wars, not because I was particularly like a console warrior or anything, because that's where all the good discussion was. And eventually a friend of mine who worked at a small website was like, do you want to write reviews? Like, you're good at this, we'll pay you. I said, sure. And I did that for a while, and I racked up a lot of experience. And ironically, what got me into, like, I guess to be successful at this job was fighting games. I was reviewing Guilty Gear Strive, and I was like, this is probably the last one I'm going to do. Like, I'm getting paid, but it's not a lot of money. It is a lot of work. And I joined up with the Discord server that Mitchell Saltzman runs, because he was advertising it pre-Strive, and we realized that we had played against each other in the beta and really liked playing against each other. And then we were both reviewing the game, and we were talking about it a lot, and he was like, oh, well, let me see some of the work. And so at this point, I'd racked up probably like 150 plus professional, writing credits on reviews and features and all this other stuff. And so I sent it to him and he said, we got to get you on IGN. And they got me on a review. I pitched something to the former features editor, Lucy. That went up. And then I got something on Into the Spine. And then that just kind of snowballed into being A, well regarded for what I was able to do, and B, like, becoming very well known for being very good at a few specific genres, specifically like fighting games, strategy games, action games, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you could consult like our Lucas episode, Lucas White, and he talked about having a niche. And I think that is super important. It's not necessarily that you're limited to it, but it's nice to be able to point to an area that's not very well explored and be like, yes, I am an expert in that. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And then that kind of has led to a bunch of other stuff, you know, that I've been very lucky to do. So very non-traditional path. They were just kind of me stumbling into stuff and meeting people at the right time.
Sometimes that's how it goes. Who did you all stumble into when you all were at Evo?
Well, I mean, I ran into a bunch of a bunch of people. Obviously, we ran into the entire Golden Weeklies crew. For anybody who doesn't know, I run a fighting game weekly called Golden Weeklies for friends and Games Press to kind of encourage people to stick with fighting games longer and improve and practice. So the entire Golden Weeklies crew basically was there. But that would be Bro, myself, Ronny, Brian Barnett, who will be on the next episode. Spoiler. A bunch of other guys. Mitch was there. And then, you know, you run into people like prominent fighting game commentators and you have conversations with them. So, you know, a lot of people.
This was my first Evo and I loved it. Like, this was super, super fun. And yeah, you run into like casually just, you know, legends just sitting at a booth playing and you're like, oh my god, that's so and so. It's crazy.
I remember Bro and I were watching Casuals in Strive and I was just kind of put him on the shoulder. I'm like, that's Latif.
like literally there was a moment where like there was a who's who, and then like 2 minutes after we went on that spiel, Leffen walks out for his set. I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck.
And you all competed, right? You were all in, like, I know Bro did Third Strike, Strive, and Street Fighter 6 pools.
I competed in Strive, Third Strike, and Tekken.
And how'd that work out for you?
I got out of my pool in Strive. I went 4-2 in Third Strike and 1-2 in Tekken. And I'm proud of all of those because I basically didn't get to practice before the tournament. I hadn't played Third Strike in at least 6 months. So winning record, very happy with that. It went good.
Ronny did not. He was working. He was literally holding a camera most of the time. He was on the grind.
I would like to point out Will was also working.
True. Oh, he was writing and doing stuff. Yes,
right,
but he didn't. Like, he entered.
For sure. Yeah, I would love to compete at Evo 1 year when the stars align. But yeah, the last 2 years I've been usually holding a camera and running from appointment to appointment. So I had actually, since we weren't shooting a vlog, I had a little bit of extra time this year, but still not enough to where I felt comfortable having extra like pools appointments. So
which one would you have done if you had time magically?
That's a good question. This year probably Strive, although I don't say I would feel particularly confident in any of them right now. I just haven't had enough time to practice. But probably Strive and possibly Third Strike just for the novelty of, you know, freaking competing in Third Strike.
Yeah, for me, like, especially after, because I mean, spoiler alert, my only wins in Third Strike were DQs, so it's kind of phony. But that being said,
we take those.
We take those. Yes. But after that, a lot of the enjoyment was watching games. The Third Strike lead up to like top 6 was super entertaining for me, and then the grand finals and stuff, like the top 6 was, I was with Ronny that Saturday night, and that was crazy.
Yeah, we all had this big row of so at Evo they reserved like a row for press basically, and we had like 6th row back just to the left of the stage, so pretty good seats, and we're all sitting there. There's like 10 of us in a row, you know, lined up watching. I think I stayed in basically there the whole day Sunday, and I was there a good chunk of Saturday too. So it's a great spectator experience. You know, if you're somebody listening to this and you've never been to Evo, I will tell you the same thing that I've said on multiple other podcasts. Just pull the trigger and go. Like, if you want to go, just do it.
I will say I've worked Comic-Con, E3, Gamescom. Evo's by far my favorite event to actually attend. And of course, that's different. Being on the working side, I had a media badge. I was able to get into certain places and not wait in lines because there were some issues getting into the arena, things like that. But just in terms of the actual experience, as someone on the show floor, I'd say Evo is by far my favorite.
And I liked the games. I don't know how much y'all can talk about. I mean, it's been like a couple weeks now. I loved the games on the floor that they were promoting. I loved City of the Wolves. Like quite a bit. I'm like excited for it coming next year.
Yeah, I got to play that game at the SNK World Championships right before the official reveal.
Ooh.
IGN sent me out there, and I'm very grateful for that. It was a great experience. I did get food poisoning.
Oh.
Listen, I had to have some street meat, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that game is fantastic, and I cannot wait for it. I had so much fun. I remember they would give us like an hour on the machines at the World Championships, and eventually we were like, listen, like, can we play some more? And they made us wait for like 30 minutes, and they were like, you can go. You know, it was great. So we just sat there like running sets.
That's so fun.
Which top 6 was your favorite? I personally, as a casual fighting game viewer, I love the Street Fighter Third Strike top 6, but that's just because Hayo is such a showman. He struck the Van Damme on stage.
The splits were amazing. They were very impressive. I really liked watching Strive top 6. Because it was exciting throughout. I think my interest peaked and waned in the other ones. You know, Third Strike does have a Chun Yun fight at the end. Spoiler alert.
It started with Elena.
It started. Hey, it was good. But that being said, Strive was exciting. By grand finals, it was the most exciting.
Yeah, I thought that was the best Strive bracket that Evo has ever had for a top 6. It was really cool as for me, as somebody who has followed like the Japanese gear scene for a very long time. Probably like 20 years at this point. It was really cool to see Tatsuma make top 6 and go really far and do really, really well, make it to grand finals and like play a great set, you know, and see all these like newer players and younger players and older players, especially like in Street Fighter 6, you know, one of those kids like anyone was like 17 years old. So like to see the old generation, you know, who's been doing this forever come out and do well, and the young kids come out and do well and put on these fantastic sets. It's pretty awesome.
And good character variety in most of them. Strive was good. I was so glad to not see Happy Chaos that much in that. And I even liked Grand Blue. Grand Blues was fun. The other one on the floor I wanted to talk about was 2XKO. 2XKO is so much fun. I loved it. Yes. The alpha is coming soon to people that got the early signups, which you got if you went to Evo. So I'm going to play that a bunch.
Yep.
Yep.
If you have not played, I'm going to shamelessly plug myself for a second. If you have not played 2XKO and you want to know what it's all about, I wrote about it for IGN. That game is looking sick.
There you go. We're all about plugs here.
You are free
and
to
Ronny,
plug yourself
Ronny is in
our
that
domain.
video, and Ronny helped get a lot of that footage. You know, you'll see me playing, you'll see Ronny playing, you'll see Apology Man, who is a pro Strive player, former pro DBSE player in there. We had some really good stuff. So if you're interested in that game, you should absolutely look into it. Read that preview. Check out what other people have written about it. 2XKO is going to be something cool.
Especially for people that are intimidated by complex inputs, because it's a simple input kind of game, but it's still very intriguing and dynamic. So it's good.
Yeah, and it's so pretty. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
What I've found the few times I've played 2XKO, yes, there are simplified inputs, but I think you really need to think about what you're doing in neutral, which is what I enjoy most about fighting games. I'm not a big, really long combo guy. I'm more of a force as many character interactions as you can kind of person. That's where I find the joy in fighting games. And it feels like 2XKO is going to just have that in spades between... there are crazy neutral skip things you can do, but how you apply those and how unsafe a lot of those are, I think it really leads itself to thinking about what you're doing, and I think simplifying the inputs only kind of emphasizes that point more, if that makes any sense.
Especially with the team mechanic, because it's basically a tag team with assist for another person. And
dude, those handshake
I always
tags are so much fun.
Oh yeah. Oof. Oh my gosh, it's a blast. I will 100% go next year. So, declaring it now.
I'm looking
Actually,
at it. After all you guys have said about how fun Evo was, I'm definitely considering it, especially if I can get a media badge.
it's
There
worth
you
going
go.
for sure. But yeah, something I actually talked to Apology Man about while we were there is I've asked him, since it can be a 2-on-2 game, you're relying on a partner when you like tag in and stuff. I asked him, has anyone developed like shorthand or some kind of sign language to signal to your opponent? Because if you're playing across from someone, you can't just say, "Hey, burst here," because then your burst is going to get baited. So are people doing like foot taps? Are they poking each other? Are there like, "Hey, let's run this weird football play name so everyone knows what we're doing"? Like, I'm very curious to see how like the meta behind the meta develops for that game, considering it's a team game.
There are games with doubles. I remember Street Fighter X Tekken used to run doubles. I don't remember others, but like that is existing. I wonder what the meta is. I don't know. We'd have to dig deep for those pros.
I
Cool.
I imagine that people are gonna Street Fighter Cross Tekken is a really good example because the guys who played that at a high level like trained nonstop in that game, and like they wouldn't even have to say stuff to each other. It was like, when I do this, like this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that coordination for the team is the dream. But gentlemen, are we ready for the variety minute?
Yes.
Always.
I think so.
This week's variety minute is fighting game mains. To explain what a main is real quick, basically, it's the character you play as the most. But that's an understatement for what it is, y'all. What is a fighting game main to you all?
I guess if I'm sitting down to play any given fighting game and it's real shit hours, it is the character I'm gonna pick. It is the character you know best, or at the very least have the most fun with.
I agree. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm always waiting, and then I wait like a beat too long and start talking again. So for me, a main in a fighting game is a character that allows you to express yourself. Fighting games for me are all about player expression, right? Like, how do you play neutral? What kind of combos do you use? What does your pressure look like?
I agree.
On defense.
A really good example is like a me. I'm gonna go ahead and get into it for this. Like I play grapplers and zoners. I don't like a lot of combos like Ronnie. I do like big damage, or I like controlling space and saying "get off me." So a lot of the characters I look to are characters that suit that thing, or charge characters. I like charge characters because it's, to me, in my brain, simpler than DP motions. I'm like, oh, I just hold back and then I do the thing. And that all makes sense to me and it speaks to me. And then with that, you find the characters that really suit the play style and you sort of influence each other. Not the player expression is that not one character is played exactly the same by everybody. So there's a little bit of a back and forth there that's beautiful.
So this has actually, I'm going to get a little more into, I guess, the mechanics of it, because this is something I've always wondered about myself. I don't really know why I gravitate to certain characters, but something I have realized across multiple games recently is status effects that apply that you can then pop later for bigger damage or bigger combos. I played Testament for a while, and they've got the Stain State that pops, and then you get extra combos. Same thing with Johnny, who I play now. You throw out the card, pop him up in the air. And also I play Aki in Street Fighter 6, who has the Poison State that you then pop for bigger damage. So I've just now realized that something that I like is like applying an effect that you get like secondary benefits from later on.
Well, I think that goes into your complex interactions is sometimes you will sacrifice damage or Oki or whatever for the sake of setting something up that will pay off later.
For sure. I love to think about why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think that's where a lot of the fun lies. And honestly, I think that's why, as much as I enjoy games like Dragon Ball Fighters, so much of that can feel like kind of a single player game at times.
Mm-hmm.
in that not just for the length of combos, but like you've got your mix into setup, whether it's the snap meta back in season 2, or you know, combo into you better not block this level 3 because then you're getting an instant left right high low mix up immediately after. Just there's so much steamrolling that happens in games like that, and that's not really where I find my joy in fighting games.
Yeah, for me, I gotta agree with Ronnie, and people who like have played against me are going to be like, how can you say that? Like you play like very suffocating characters, but
You play Soul.
yeah, I do play Soul. But I think what's people kind of miss about like Soul as a character, or just the characters I play in general, is yeah, I like rushdown characters. I want to be in your face, but I like those characters because they're constantly forcing me to think.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm playing Soul, like I have strike throw pressure. Unless I have meter, I cannot put you into a mix-up. I have to condition you to do the stuff that I want, so that I can do the things that I want to you.
Yeah, to me, Will, it feels like you don't like running over people. You like forcing interactions on your terms.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Yeah, I like controlling the pace of a game, and I like my thought process when I pick a character is I'm going to pick a character that has an execution requirement that is generally pretty high. I'm going to pick a character that has a win condition that is quite strong when they get to it, but maybe they have to work for it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to outplay you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to force you into these situations, and I'm just going to play better than you. I'm going to condition you to do what I want you to do, and when you do, I'm going to kill you for it.
Will, you need to play Brian in Tekken 8.
I don't know. I think Lydia scratches that itch.
That's true.
I wanted to say something that might apply in the main topic is I remember you saying this, Will, about Soul specifically is like that style, right? And this goes back to the main is you're like, nobody plays like Soul. And that's true. And you can look into the games we're about to talk about, even when there's a legacy character that's sort of influenced or it's slightly different. Every game changes things. So when Will plays Soul, it's different per every game as well. But it's also like Soul is the one character that Will identifies the most with. And thus, he becomes the omniversal main, if you will.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just, like, put so much into a character in one version of a game, you sort of have that attachment now. So when, like, the sequel comes out, it's like, well, I gotta play this character, even though they may be changed up, because I've got loyalty, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think, that's another thing that kind of gets maybe lost in the sauce when people talk about mains. Characters don't always come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about some of the games we're going to talk about today, but if you really attach yourself to a character and they don't come back in the sequel, that can really bum you out. I know people who were not going to play Stride because they were like, hey man, I want to play Slayer and he's not in the game, or I want to play Raven and he's not in the game. So I think that that's another underrated part of it, because when you find that character and then they just don't come back either for lore reasons or story reasons or budget reasons, or they're like, hey, we're going to do this archetype with this other character, but they don't quite work the same way, it can be really distressing as a player who's like, this is the character that I want,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other one element I want to talk about with fighting game mains is like the visual design. The visual design also is informed by the mechanics of the actual play. But that being said, sometimes I like picking goofy characters. I think that's also a thing that's like very understated about me, because that's also a way I approach the game. I don't approach it hyper competitively. I want a good time before I want to win. And I think that's reflected by the characters I play, even though they can definitely be a bit of a bully sometimes.
I think the mental damage is definitely a factor, especially like when you play Honda. It's not just that you outplayed me, it's that you outplayed me and then ended it with a butt stomp, right? That's harrowing.
You got some Honda ass in your way.
Yeah. As a more casual fighting game player, I definitely go more off of vibes and such. Generally what I'll do is if the game has like a combo trial mode, I'll try each character's combo trials and see which I got through easiest, which flow I understand best. That's how I wound up playing Lily in Tekken 8, is because the other characters I was kind of not really getting their stances down too much, but Lily with the do glide, the feisty rabbit, it all just clicked for me and made sense. It's like, oh, after I do any move, just hold forward, and then I can do more moves.
That making sense thing really speaks to everything, really. I remember this is gonna be an adjacent fighting game, Smash Bros. I play Ness in Smash Bros, who is a bit of a zoner, but also he usually kills through the back throw. So it's a little bit of a mix of both, but I also like just it speaks to me because it does the setup, it does the PK fire into the thing. It's annoying. I also like annoying.
That makes sense.
As an Axel player.
Yes. As an anything player, honestly, if my opponent is annoyed, it's a good time.
How do you feel about JoJo?
Oh, you mean the game?
No, I'm just talking about Axel in general.
Oh, I love the time stop. I love this is the first zoner that I played that isn't projectile based. It's the first limb zoner that made sense to me. I'm gonna try Billy Kane when City of the Wolves comes out.
Well, because you started playing Axel in Strive, and then you're like, I think Dulcim makes sense to me now, and then you started picking up Dulcim in Street Fighter 6.
That's one of the other things is like, even if you stick to one main, I would encourage you to broaden horizons to understand how other things work. When I started back in like 2009 or whatever, the reason why I picked grapplers was because I was losing to my friends in Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD, and when I picked Zangief, I could delete a health bar. That's why I chose that, but it was very limited. That's a very limited archetype. So the more you try different things, the more your brain expands. So, you know, it all connects to each other.
I think there are certain things that you get, like, your priorities are going to change the more you play a fighting game, right? You know, you might start off as like, I want to be a zoner, I want to be a grappler, I want to do these easy things, and then you might get better and you might be like, hey, I want to do an execution thing, or you know what, I really like mix-ups. Or you can become so paralyzed by indecision about what you do like because you decided you like a dozen things that it can be difficult for you to pick a character. So like, the concept of a main can also be hurtful as well as helpful, because some people like get really into this idea of like, it has to be the right character, and if I don't play the right character, I'm not gonna have fun, or it has to be a top tier. If I don't play a top tier, I'm not gonna have fun. And it can leave people in these really like crazy circles where they just keep second guessing themselves.
Yeah.
It's an identity crisis in game form.
Yes.
Speaking of identity crises, I need to, at some point, address why I keep playing thin blonde women in fighting games.
Because the normals.
I guess it has to be the white woman normals, because early on, I played, like, Injustice, and I played Harley Quinn. I'm not even a big Harley Quinn fan of the comics. I just liked how she played in that game. Then I played Cassie Cage in Mortal Kombat X. Fighter Z, I play Kefla. King of Fighters 13, I played King. You'd think Street Fighter 6, I'd play Cammy, but actually I play Lily and Marisa. And then Tekken 8, I play Lily.
I just think it's... Listen, either you just have a thing for white girls, blonde white girls specifically, which, okay, sure. Or you just have a thing for white woman normals. And I feel like we have to explain the concept of white woman normals.
I'm still not even
leave
sure.
that dangling. That's not a simple Google.
Ronnie, can you take this? Because you will do it justice, I think.
White woman normals, if I understand it correctly. The big archetype movement you'll see from it is the very long-ranged, double-legged sweep in a lot of fighting games. But typically it's a term that denotes normals that have hitboxes extended past what they should, also known as white woman privilege. Just lots of moves that should be way stronger than they are. Will, if you want to add to that, that's kind of how I understand it.
No, I think that's a good explanation. I think it's like white women characters specifically have a long history. This goes all the way back to like Cammy, right? And just female characters in fighting games use a lot of kick attacks generally, and they have very long legs. And so it's partially like, yeah, their buttons are just like exceptional, right? And this again goes back to Chun-Li, who is not white, but that's the history. And then eventually it transferred into like really excellent kick moves like see Cammy, or just these buttons that go really far and are disjointed and feel like I shouldn't have gotten hit from that range, and I did. And they're safe. So, like, these very privileged buttons that just emphasize what it is to be a white girl in fighting games.
Even if it's not crazy in hitbox, like B. Janae's in Garou is fast. She has like a very fast, I think it's the 2 light one. And it's like crazy. It's like, oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah, I would say the platonic ideal of a white woman with white woman normals is probably Karin in Street Fighter series.
Oh, she hella has white woman normals.
Yeah,
she's the whitest woman normals.
Yeah, that's what I think of when someone says that phrase.
If Punk plays her, well, there you go.
Yeah, like you can just kind of look at like Punk has a history of playing white women. And I think one of the reasons that like people don't always talk about this is like, listen, Punk is a very good neutral player, which means he wants to have characters that have great neutral buttons or just really strong pokes that you can throw out and be like, listen, you're not beating my crouching medium kick, bro. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea, is like mains by professional player. Like, I do associate Daigo with Ryu. I'm okay with a Ken, but like seeing him pick up a Kuma, I'm like, what are we doing here, man? What's happening?
Seeing Mina RD play Zangief recently did something to me I didn't understand.
Right, and I think that's the other thing, right? Like, you have character loyalists, you have people that push the tech for the character so far that they become associated with that character. Daigo as Ryu is a great example, even though he hasn't historically always been a Ryu main, but the idea of, Street Fighter 4 where he was so dominant for so long and he just played Ryu became this idea that Daigo is a character loyalist. Not really true. Or you have and this is mostly like a Japanese thing. I don't think the West does it quite as much, but Tokido is associated with Akuma. Guys like Fab are associated with Potemkin, Mochi is Soul. You have these characters that have built these really long histories with these characters and have developed so much tech and become so iconic for their play that when they don't play those characters, it's a little bit weird.
It's probably a bigger topic unto itself. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the contradiction between professionals using characters they're loyal to rather than, as a professional using the best tool for the job is just a very interesting conversation to have. It's like, yeah, if you're playing for $1 million, use the best character. It's kind of dumb not to.
Long ago on this podcast, I don't remember what episode, I said you can always clock which character is busted by if Sonic Fox is picking them up. Because Sonic Fox shows up to win.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
Tokido is the same way, even though people associate him with Akuma. Tokido does not care. Tokido is going to pick a top tier.
Yeah, he's stuck with Ken.
Yeah, that's it's the Sanford Kelly advice, right? Like, just pick a top tier. But yeah, it is very funny, and I think it's becoming less and less of a thing. Specifically, it was something we associated with the older players who are, in a lot of cases, retiring or changing because they have to adapt with the times. But you still have those character specialists who come in and they're like, everyone's like, this character's washed, and then they're like, let me show you something, and then they go win a major.
Well, I think it means less now too, because tiers, back then were much more stratified. You didn't have constant updates, you didn't have patches. The best characters in Third Strike have been the best characters for over 20 years. And yeah, you're still getting tech for low tiers, and you're going to get a Q player who runs over other people, but like, when you have a game set in stone like that with different fighting game sensibilities, like not specifically thinking about balance, you're going to have a lot more both loyalists and strongest tools, so to speak.
And this goes back to that thing of like, this will lead into Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, where it's like, imagine that you've been playing the same character for 15 years, 20 years. It's kind of hard to switch characters. Thankfully, nowadays, these things are a lot more balanced, or at least balanced after a patch. But that being said, like, if you're a Zato main, you have to adjust every patch to whatever the patch is going to dictate. You know what I mean? And like, you can multitask, but you still have a main. And that's what the main conversation's all about.
Yeah. And it's been interesting to watch people try to adapt to patch culture. To use the Zato example, like Jonathan Tene was like a very good Zato got to Arc World Finals, and then basically as soon as he qualified, they nerfed the character really hard, and he was like, how do I explain to my mother that, like, you know, I'm out of a job because they released a patch, and he was joking at the time, but he really hasn't placed as well with any character since then. You know, there's this running joke among pros that you are one patch away from being irrelevant. Ooh. And like in a genre now where we are especially defined by patch culture, like, it's true.
I mean, Street Fighter 6 literally built their, like, a weird hype around patches. It's like, we're not going to really patch this game until a year from now. And you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. But people were excited when it happened.
That was too long. But now I am... now I can't get the image of Jonathan Tene's mother at Christmas saying, if you say negative edge one more time, I'm throwing you out the window.
Yeah. Well, it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And I remember... You know, I was standing next to him at EVO this year, and I was listening to I was watching pools, and he was watching pools with some other pro players, and they were asking him, you know, he was talking about when he went out, and they're like, who are you playing? He was like, Soul, but like, I don't really feel it. You know what I mean? And like, that's the struggle, right? Like, especially when we talk about the main, you know, sometimes the character you love isn't good, or they don't work the way you want them to, or, you know, it's hard. I do not envy anybody who really wants to love a game and has a hard time finding a character that makes them feel the way they want to feel.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a fantastic segue into our main topic.
Plural.
Topics.
Thank you. With an S.
It is a slug match. It is a versus Street Fighter 3 versus Garou. Let's get cracking.
Now, the officials are ready. The fighters are in the ring, and they are ready. So, for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Your life's on the line, so I'ma take yours. So who wanna blood dance with me? Leave your body wrapped up or even a street fantasy. In the square, yo, you best to beware. Street fighter, we ain't playing over here. One-on-one, kid, you know you get finished. Round one, round two, so come and get with it. Your heart ain't cold stone, forget about the power. Battle this out to the 24th hour. Paying the price that you couldn't deal with. Cold-blooded killers in my lockdown clique. Got no time to waste, we taking time bombs. Street Fighter 3 like the scar on my arm. Make your first move, so what's it gonna be? You're trapped in a new world of Street Fighter 3. The third chapter, so what's it gonna be? You're trapped in a new world of Street Fighter 3. Make your first move, so what's it gonna be? You're trapped in a new world of Street Fighter 3. The third chapter, so what's it gonna be? You're trapped in a new world of Street Fighter 3. Yo, rock what you got, block what you shot. Another chapter of what you get, what you got. Enough warriors here to fight, choose one. The best of the best.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Our first game of the week is Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, developed and published by Capcom and released in 1999 for arcades. It is the third version of Street Fighter 3. The first one is New Generation, and the second one is Second Impact. Notable for many things which we will get into, it was considered unpopular at launch, but has since become one of the most well-regarded fighting games in history. Notable things include a roster that is mostly newcomers, but does have old favorites, and a super system and a parry system that can lead to explosive and infamous interactions. The story takes place many years after Street Fighter 2, where some of our favorite characters have taken apprentices or new chapters in their journey. The head of the Illuminati Guild is hosting a tournament searching for the world's strongest fighters. Now we must make our first move. What's it gonna be? We are trapped in the world of Street Fighter 3. Gentlemen, what do we think of Third Strike?
I mean, as a quick intro, Will helped us on this video for IGN. If you check our top 10 fighting games of all time, you will see Third Strike as the number 1.
Yes, and I wrote that blurb.
Yeah, if you want to know what Will and I specifically feel about it, that's about how we feel about it.
I watched Maximilian Dude react to that video.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did too. Considering that was my voice in the narration, that was an uncomfortable watch until I could tell that he liked it.
Yeah, it was very weird. I think the most liked thing I've ever gotten was like replying to either one of him or Rufo Monger's videos on that, being like, "I'm glad you liked it. Here's what our thoughts were." But I'm actually gonna read, if you guys don't mind, what that top 10 says about Third Strike.
Please regale us.
Because A, I'm proud of what I wrote, but B, I think it's a pretty good idea of where I stand and where Ronny stands, as Ronny said. So here, to give you a little background, we had to pick one game from every series. We did not allow ourselves to do more than that, and we picked based on, can you still play it? Is it fun? Historical significance? Can you buy it easily? And this is what I wrote. It's 2 paragraphs. Picking a single game to represent the most storied fighting game franchise was a tough ask. After all, Street Fighter 2 popularized the genre when it hit the arcades in 1991, and Street Fighter 4 resurrected it when it hit home consoles in 2009. But Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is something special. It gave us Evo Moment 37, the Daigo parry, and inspired an entire generation of players. But there's so much more to it than that. The sprite work is still some of the most beautifully animated around, the background's ooze style, and the jazz-inspired soundtrack features some of the best music in any fighting game. Even the roster, underappreciated at the time because of how few characters carried over from Street Fighter 2, and how weird several of them are, holds up remarkably well with options to suit any playstyle. But the real highlight is the parry system. The decision to make any attack, from Hadokens to Super Arts parryable, adds almost limitless depth to a series already renowned for it, while keeping it fairly easy to pick up and play. Third Strike showed us what was possible, bringing the genre's most important series up to speed with its contemporaries while simultaneously elevating it to new heights. More importantly, it all holds up today, something most games from 1999 can't say, and recent re-releases even support rollback netcode. It is quite simply the greatest fighting game ever made.
Pretty good. Those are pretty good 2 paragraphs.
Yeah. The vibes are so on point in Third Strike. Just from the soundtrack, the computerized voice, and the character select, and just the wide range of different character designs. It feels like a toy box. To me, way more than a fighting game. Just all these different like character archetypes and things. It's fun to mess around with.
You know, I think that the thing that has to be remembered about when we talk about Third Strike is that it was not designed the way that a modern fighting game is designed. They were not thinking about frame data. They were not thinking about, competitive balance. They were largely a team of animators, and they wanted to make a game that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Third Strike is to this day. It's still some of the most beautiful sprite work you will ever see in any video game. But they were not thinking about the stuff that we think about, that we know designers think about when we are making a fighting game or critiquing a fighting game. And I think that's part of what makes Third Strike magic, because it wasn't designed that way. And no fighting game is ever going to be designed that way again. It's kind of the end of an era of like, how did they design? Like, combos were accidental. People don't always think about this, but and they just decided to keep it because it was cool. Like Street Fighter 3 is a lot of like, what if we did this? And they weren't thinking about like, the things that have calcified in the genre since then.
What really helps and what I really like about Third Strike, we can get into parries more later, especially when we talk Garou, because it has an analog or a comparison point. But that being said, is I like all the other stuff too. I like the dizzy meter in this. The stun meter is so cool to me because it offers a slightly different approach to things, like in terms of interactions. Characters I play, such as Alex and Oro, want stun. Same with Ryu. Ryu wants stun. That stun bar goes up and it's better for you. It's not necessarily about damage sometimes when you pick a button. I also like the super meter. The super meter is very interesting in Third Strike because you choose your super out of 3 for characters, and some characters have one you should just pick straight up, but for other characters you sort of have a choice to make whether or not you want 2 bars, whether or not you want something that has a lot of pool for your EX moves where you spend meter to make your move better, or if you just want a really, really good fucking super. And to me, I love how that interweaves into expression with the character. A good example was literally top 6, the winner, I forget his name, who played Elena. He played Elena with heal against Hugo. He played Elena with the kick super against Yun. And that is a fantastic understanding of the character, and everything is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about Elena with heal gives me PTSD to the final release of Street Fighter 4.
That's
but
rough.
no,
That's right.
but just giving an anecdote, like Will said, about the look of the game. My wife is not a big fan of fighting games, but I was playing Third Strike the other day. I was just drilling some like Dudley combos, and she just looked up at it and she was like, "This game is really beautiful." I was like, "Yeah," and she said, "Has anything been updated?" I'm like, "Oh, this is like a remastered version with higher resolution," and she's like, "Yeah, I can tell by the way the characters are moving." I was like, "Oh no, like the UI and stuff is updated. The resolution is. That's just how it looked back then. Whether it's like Elena's neutral stance or just the way Makoto's bouncing around and her gi like flying behind her, like this, I would say maybe other than Garou, like there's no game that approaches these sprites."
Mm-hmm.
I think we're forgetting one.
Please tell me.
King of Fighters 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, SNK is
King of
really
Fighters.
good. I will say SNK is really good at it. We'll talk about it
Yeah,
later, but yes.
I would say King of Fighters 13 is an absolutely beautiful game, but it's almost different enough to where I don't really see it as the same.
Fair.
It is a beautiful game, but to me that feels a little more like comparing apples and oranges. But no, I totally see what you mean. That's a gorgeous game as well.
Even getting into the technical side, like as someone who is averse to motion inputs for the longest time, and anyone else who is like me, just pick up Third Strike. The inputs are so clean. It reads it every single time. It's like cutting warm butter.
The game has an excellent input reader. It has a very, very tight input window.
Mm-hmm.
Like Street Fighter 3's Third Strike does not have like SNK level execution requirements, but the input reader is very tight. Like it expects you to do these cancels in 2 to 3 frames.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is now, this goes into the way fighting games are designed, but now that's considered like high execution. At the time, that was normal.
Yeah, like Makoto, my favorite character in this game, her command grab is, speaking of high stun, her command grab has a very tight window to do her optimal, standing heavy punch afterwards. And that's like the cornerstone of her gameplay is an extremely tight link. Mm-hmm. And if you want to use her super 2, it only hits from a particular part of the screen, and it changes the distance depending on which button you press. So you can't press and release all 6 buttons to give yourself 6 chances, because just how the old input reader works. You've got to press that button with the right timing extremely tightly. But the game reads it well enough to where, like, if you know what you're doing, it's gonna work every time.
Thank God. Oro's super also his super 2 also depends on like trajectory wise what strength you put in stuff. I love stuff like that. I wanted to talk real quick, and this is going to kind of segue into the roster itself. We've made these comparisons before privately, Murph, about the idea of remixing and sampling, and this definitely plays into like the hip hop jazz element here. If you listen to the godlike OST of Third Strike, there's a lot of sampling. There's a lot of many influences in the thing, and you can see when you play the different characters that they do seem to have a blend of many things, and it can be alienating at points. Like, for instance, let's say you are a Dulcine player and you like to zone with long normals and you're looking at the roster of the game. The initial pick would be Necro, but when you play Necro, you realize that his long limbs are sort of more functional for like a mix with Blanca. And it's much more remixed into like oh, I'm supposed to be on top of you and you're supposed to guess what the fuck I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna be wild and feral. And it's crazy. And that could be alienating, but it can also be a very cool play style.
Yeah, what if you took a street rough boxer like Balrog and then made him a British gentleman?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get
Yes.
Dudley. Like, there's...
Dudley is
game-
the coolest boxer in the history of boxers.
Dudley is my
I mean,
second favorite character in Third Strike. But like, if you... I think you're right about just kind of the hip-hop idea of sampling and remixing, and that there's almost an uncanny valley effect to Street Fighter 3. It's like, it's so far in the future, first of all, that it kind of feels like an alternate dimension for these characters.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just enough different about it where, yeah, this is Street Fighter, but it's also something else entirely.
Yeah.
I haven't played this character before, or have I?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love all the characters. I love Dudley. And it's so weird because, like, in terms of gameplay, the person closest to Balrog would probably be Q ? But in terms of archetype of boxer, they just completely reinvented it. Instead of like, oh, what if it's like a rough, charging bull? It's a finesse of mix-ups and fucking setups with the taunts. We're going to get into taunts later. Dudley's so much fun.
Dudley's awesome.
I just to go taunts right now since we're on the topic, I like how taunts have functions in this game. If depending on the character, the taunt has a different function per, like, Q will increase his defense
By a massive amount.
Yeah.
by a massive, makes
So,
him
like,
way more viable.
You taunt 3 times, I think you have a 25% increase to defense, which is crazy.
And isn't it also like a huge increase to damage as well?
I think it's
don't-
just defense
I think
for
it's just
Q.
defense.
Other characters have taunts that increase damage, but for Q, I think specifically it's defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be super helpful. And I just love that. I like how it incorporates a choice into things. I like taunts. I'm a huge fan of taunts.
Well, it gives you something else to do in the neutral, right? And Street Fighter has taunts, and it also has just like whiffing normals to build meter, which I
Mhm.
haven't seen in
Yes.
any other fighting
Yes.
game.
You see that a lot in Third Strike.
It gives the impression of like 2 fighters across the stage, like shadow boxing,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like working themselves up, getting ready to scrap again. It's a lot of people don't like it. I think it's very cool.
I agree. I wouldn't like it if every game was like that, but I think it works completely for Third Strike.
Well, because it works in Third Strike, because again, the jazz metaphor, it's about, it's about the attacks you're not doing as much as it's the attacks you are doing. It just, everything feels very light and bouncy in this game. It's like every fight, even when it's like Akuma and Gil, it feels like it's the last scene of Rocky 3. It's just we're just sparring a bit, we're just having fun with it.
There's a back and forth.
Yeah.
This game's also explosive. I think the cool thing is I think the strong defensive universal tools, specifically the parry and red parry system, it's sort of like an equalizer. Because if you are good enough at those universal defensive tools, things like typical zoning become way less important because you see a fireball coming super fucking easy. And it makes it more of a level playing field. And that's why you see those explosive moments, both, Evo moment 37 and the Hayao moment. They're built on parries, which are high execution, high reading. You have to basically know they're going to do that. And it makes magic come to life.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about it now. Can I just talk about it?
Sure.
Go ahead.
this is the thing that I was saying when I was saying earlier that Third Strike is interesting, right? Because Evo Moment 37 completely changed the perception of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Completely. Third Strike was not popular. It was so not popular that Capcom didn't make another Street Fighter game for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Oof.
like it was not popular. Nobody played it, and Evo was not what it is now. 20 years is a really long time. But that moment, right? And I have argued for a long time, like what makes fighting games appeal to me, and I think just competitive stuff in general. I think the reason we're so into sports and the reason we're so into like great moments is because human beings really want, against all odds and against all, our whole lives telling us that this doesn't exist, to like find moments of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I've written about this before, but Daigo was perfect for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
You can time it. You can time it from the start of that whole interaction to the end. It's 3 seconds, he's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And not only perfect in the execution of the parry, right? But he spaces it perfectly. He knows the parry is coming. You have to start parrying that super before it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
He does the jump parry, which is even harder, and then ends in the optimal combo to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't win the tournament. He does not win Evo that year. Nobody remembers that, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
He was perfect for 3 seconds, and that's why Third Strike. And people looked at that, right? And people who didn't play fighting games or played fighting games casually and said, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And a game that allows you to have those moments where if you can execute, right? We get really down on execution requirements in modern games, and people are like, I don't like quarter circles. I think you should just be able to press a button and have the thing come out. Forgetting that that's part of their thing that makes them great. And that's part of the reason that fighting games are awesome, is because if you can do that stuff, a game that makes it possible, that's really cool. It's the same thing, another thing that gets circulated again, it's another Daigo thing, is when he does that big combo against Momochi at DreamHack, I think it is. He's Evil Ryu. He does this big combo, it does like 80% of the guy's health, but it's all one frame links. He has to be consecutively perfect to do that combo, and he does it. He does the whole thing in a tournament. That moment completely changed what the reputation of that game is.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's perfect in terms of narrative, right? You don't have to play fighting games to see that health bar is really fucking low. If that goes any further, you're gonna die. And then you see that perfect execution, and you see that perfect strategy, and then the narrative plays out. Especially in Evo Moment 37, where the setup is let's go Justin, and then the super happens, and then if you do play the game, you know how hard it is, or you know how hard Chun-Li's super is to defend against. You're like, oh my god, like Chun-Li's super is just fucking. Justin used to just whip it out. He still whips it out once in a while.
Right, and it's the crowd reaction, right? Because nobody. And the other thing at that point was nobody in the U.S. thought it was possible that you could even parry that super. Realistically, like you could maybe parry some of it, but all of it, like, and the timing changes depending on where you're standing, because certain kicks will hit you. It's crazy, and I think about this a lot. But how lucky are we, and how much does the future of this genre change if nobody is recording that moment?
Oh yeah, like a lot.
We're in a completely different world if nobody, by chance, if you can find recordings of the rest of that bracket, I will pay you money for it, because I haven't been able to find them. But you could find Evo Moment. What are the odds of that, right? That at that moment somebody was filming. And and like we cannot, when we talk about Third Strike, it's impossible to separate it from that, right? Because so much of its legacy after that goes back to, I want to do that. I want to play a game that lets me do that.
Yeah.
I would say just to, I mean, you got to speak about the parry system, of course. The thing that I always loved about it is the extra mental damage it does to you. Because getting parried and then immediately getting comboed back, it's like, oh, they knew exactly what I was going to do. They were ready for it, and I paid for it dearly. It creates a sense of kind of never being out of it, even when realistically you are in the neutral. Of course, there's checkmate situations. Like I said, Makoto grabs you with SA2 on her side of the screen. Say goodnight if their execution's up to snuff. But in the neutral, a way to completely stop all damage and be able to counterattack, third strike games are always tense, no matter where you are. And I think that's just in large part because of the parry system.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it goes to... Third Strike is a very holistically designed game, right? We don't talk about the way it uses frame to... And this is the last thing, and then we can move on, but, like... Chip, parry, red parry, multiple supers that you can choose. Like, all of those things revolve around each other, and it rewards you for having the read, executing at a high level, understanding the way the systems work, right? In a way that I think we've lost maybe a little bit in the years since, but, like, there's a reason that that game has achieved that pinnacle, and it's because it had all these things that came together. And yeah, you can throw stones at it. You know, you can be like, yeah, man, it's a Chun versus Yoon game, like, at the end of the day. And nobody cares about that because you can see the possibility of anything in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just spoke on Evo Moment 37. No one remembers the rest of the bracket. What's everyone going to remember about Third Strike next year? It's going to be Hayo and his Evo Moment 38. It's not going to be a Chunyun finals. It's going to be, look at this very limber man doing amazing things with Hugo.
Yeah.
And 41, impressive.
And that's what makes it special. And that's why it will always be special. And we will probably never see another game like it again.
No, I've been playing almost exclusively Third Strike this week and still having a ton of fun, getting my butt kicked.
Yeah, same. Dude, Jurgen is so fucking... I don't know why. Jurgen is a tough cookie to fucking crack, y'all. We didn't talk about the characters enough. Jurgen is wild.
I played a Yun this week who I think Gane-gened me twice every round into about 60% damage and then parried everything that I did.
Oof.
And I was like, I know there's players like this out here, but it's rough when you run into one.
Oh my god.
All I can do is tip my hat.
All right, yeah, let's go into Garou.
Our other game of the week is Garou, Mark of the Wolves. Created as the successor to the Fatal Fury series, Garou takes place many years after the defeat of Geese Howard in a new city named Second Southtown. Like Third Strike, the game intended to show off a new generation of fighters, most if not all having some connection to prior Fatal Fury, Real Bout, or Art of Fighting characters. The story is that the now adult Rock Howard, son of Geese, receives a mysterious invite from his uncle Kane to take part in a new King of Fighters tournament with the promise of learning the truth about his mother. The game pushed SNK's hardware, both in the arcades and their home console, the Neo Geo, to its limits. Garou returned to a traditional one-lane 2D fighter, the Real Bout series used a 3-lane system, for a straightforward, high-aggression game. It has a few other quirks, uncommon for other SNK fighters, such as the TOP system, break moves, feints, and just defense, all of which we will get into as we answer the question, what did we feel about Garou, Mark of the Wolves?
I'll let the guests answer first.
Ronnie, please take this one because I talk too much about Third Strike.
I mean, I as well know much more about Third Strike than I do Mark of the Wolves. Just I know a lot by being around the scene, but not as much as playing it. I have played quite a bit of it, but not nearly as much as Third Strike.
Why do we think that is that Garou got so overshadowed? Because it's interesting that I always hear Third Strike introduced as the greatest fighting game of all time, and then Garou is introduced as SNK's answer to Third Strike. And does that not put it on the same pedestal?
I think... Go ahead.
I was going to say, just personally, I can only speak personally, I think just always being a Capcom kid, always being a Street Fighter kid, I was never really looking to SNK games. And I would say I'm an 09er. I never really got much into fighting games in a competitive way until 2009 Street Fighter 4. I was much more a casual enjoyer, and I still did enjoy Third Strike casually before that, which is probably why I still love it so much. And I came to Mark of the Wolves very late. But yeah, from my understanding, just it was, at least in the US, it was not the household name that Street Fighter was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to... Go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro. There's
a lot to dissect regarding its lack of success now and where it is. I would say my initial impression of Garou is first off, there's only one Garou. Third Strike was built on foundations, right? If you go back to play New Generation, it's not great. It's okay. You can see a lot of the creativity forming. You can see a lot of the elements going, and I like Second Impact quite a bit. I would urge listeners to at least try Second Impact. The balancing is a little different. There's some moves missing, but it's interesting, and also the presentation is actually a step up from Third Strike, because Third Strike had to nerf some of its music and stages for the sake of having space for the amount of characters it has. Third Strike has a lot of characters. But in that sense, Third Strike was built on so much lessons learned from the past two entries, and Garou gets a lot right just by being Garou, especially with its new roster. There's only one returning character, and that's Terry. And I think in that sense, I would give it a lot of roses, but when you compare it and contrast with Third Strike, I think everyone here is like, yeah, Third Strike's the favorite to win here. There's just moments of, I would say Third Strike is more explosive. For instance, let's look at the parry system and the just defense system. The just defense system has you block at the right time to get stuff, and you get health back. And in that sense, I would say it's kind of easier to just defend, because naturally you were going to block an attack anyways, whereas forward parry or down parry is a conscious risk, and it's much more explosive in terms of feedback. It flashes blue and it makes the sound, and so when you're doing it, you're very clearly doing it a lot. I still think Garou is very interesting as a spectator game, but I think it's the little details like that make Third Strike pop as a spectator game.
I think it's a combination of stuff that you both have said. I think what Ronnie has said cannot be, underestimated. That listen, SNK has never been as big as Capcom, ever. And Street Fighter has the benefit, fair or not, of being the inventor of the genre. Right? Like, Street Fighter has that. And so, and it is, for a long time, you know, Street Fighter 2 sold so many, like millions and millions of copies. You know, I think it's like 40 million or something. Like, enormously successful run. And that's just physical sales. That's not if you look at how much money it made in the arcades. And I think the number is in the billions in Japanese yen. So it's enormously successful. It had that foundation. It got the updates, as Bro said. Garou does not. Just from scratch, being from a more prestigious series, it's from a more successful series. Most people have never played a Fatal Fury game. And I think the other thing is, like, one of the things that draws people to Street Fighter is it's pretty easy. Like, it's simple, right? It's very easy to understand Street Fighter. SNK games are a lot harder to understand. So it's more technically demanding. It's from a more niche series. It has a higher execution requirement. It does not have a moment that introduces itself to the world the way Even Moment 37 introduces Third Strike to the world. It does not have the benefit of multiple revisions. And it does not have the benefit of just saying Street Fighter on the box and having a competitive scene that will play it and recognize it and know it and love it just because it is a Street Fighter game. Yeah.
It also, like, if you, not to cut you off, Will, but if you spend any time with it just jumping in, it feels much chunkier than Third Strike does.
Yes.
For better and for worse. Like, once you dig into it and you learn about, you know, feinting and break canceling and, like, literally, like, stopping Shoryukens so you can cancel into super, there's some really cool and really good feeling stuff in there. But for the most part, lights just link into themselves, not into any heavies. You have to, if you want to link any heavies together, you have to, like, feint special moves into another heavy. Like, there's some really weird but kind of inaccessible mechanics just to play the game at a base level. So I think that as well, just the pick up and play nature of Third Strike is much more friendly to someone just coming to the game for the first time. Like, I'll admit, the first time I played Garou, like, I jumped in and I was like, I'm not really getting this. This doesn't feel great. And honestly, that's kind of the same way I feel about City of the Wolves the first time I played it. Until you spend a little more time with it, start, like, canceling EX moves and things like that. You're like, oh, like, the combo possibilities are kind of limitless and it's amazing. It's initially a much higher barrier to entry, I believe.
Yeah, definitely a higher floor. And you know, but they're so similar in a lot of ways, right? They're beautifully animated. They both have really cool soundtracks. They have these brilliant character designs. They have really unique systems that went on to influence countless other games just beyond, you know, their series, right? Like, Just Defend is a Guilty Gear mechanic. Like, it doesn't work the same way. It doesn't give you health, but it does make things that you would not be able to punish punishable because it keeps you close to them. Otherwise, they would get pushed away, right? So that mechanic made it into other series that then made it into other series. Same thing with parry, which is now, like, something that we fundamentally expect from a Street Fighter game in some way, shape, or form, and has appeared in other things. So it's, you know, they both had these new casts. Like, they're so similar in ways that you can look at them and be like, yeah, and they come out the same year, which is the funniest part. But you can put them side by side, but they're also really different, right? And one of them is, this is not to say this Third Strike is not technical, because it is, but one of them is extremely technical, has a lot of complex systems, and the other one is functionally Street Fighter with a parry. Right?
So I'll run a bit of defense for Garou here, in that I compared Third Strike as, like, the last scene of Rocky 3. Garou is like the entire last act of Rocky 4, where you are just trying to kill each other. And as someone who is a casual fighting game player who picks buttons based on vibes, the unga bunga capacity in this game is very high, and I find that fun.
Yeah, like, anyone playing Marco Rodriguez and doing one of his supers and seeing half your health drain away with one fireball.
Yes.
Like, that that invokes something primal in any fighting game player.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I think the other thing that, can't be overlooked about Garou is this is the funny part, right? I think that Garou is a better sequel
I agree.
Yeah.
100%. I was going to get into this.
I feel that.
Continue.
than Street Fighter 3 is.
100%. I wanted to do a comparison, for instance, with the legacy characters, for instance, right? So you look at Hokutomaru, the Kid Ninja, and he is a successor to Andy Bogard, but also when you play him, there's a little bit of Mai in there. And I think that translates way better, and especially in story, you see these sort of legacy things, or Rock Howard, or Marco, and they sort of echo, but they're not exactly the same character. Whereas Third Strike, for its creativity, is radically different, and they don't interconnect the same way. Like, for instance, the brothers, Kim Dong-won and Kim Jae-hoon, are interesting and are much more dynamic to me than Yun and Yang.
I think what's funny, right, is we talk about like Street Fighter 3 great cast, right? But a lot of those characters are weird, right? And a lot of them are not that popular. Like, yes, Makoto, yes, Dudley. Okay, sure, yes, absolutely. But like,
no one's asking for Necro to come back.
Nobody cares that Sean exists. If you
Remy is rotting in the grave.
if you can name the entire Third Strike cast off the top of your head, you are either someone who has played that game way too much, or you are specifically waiting for someone like me to ask you to do that on a podcast.
Uh-oh.
Garou.
No.
I kind of want to see if I can do it now.
Garou, here, listen. I let me finish making my point, and then I will pull this up and see if you can do that. But Garou, right? Like. And I think part of this is also like the way we look at that game retroactively because of the way that those characters have continued in King of Fighters. But a lot of the characters that got introduced in Garou are pretty iconic. Like, not like they're cool, they're iconic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Rock Howard is an iconic fighting game character.
Yes.
Even just Terry's updated look
is iconic, right? The bomber
iconic.
jacket, yeah. Like those are characters that you can have somebody again who's not into fighting games, right? But like maybe knows the genre a little bit. I guarantee you they know who Terry Bogard and Rock Howard are, because those characters have become larger than the game that they appeared in. And I think that's why like Garou, I would argue, is a better sequel. Like it does more interesting things mechanically, but it also introduced these characters that went on to, again, aside from like Makoto, aside from Dudley, to be real like icons in the scene, in the space, and went on to have massive influences on other characters in other games.
I think about like whenever I look at like a Street Fighter roster versus whatever its contemporary SNK roster would be for the time, SNK usually wins out purely on like the drip factor, right?
Oh yeah.
And Garou is a very drippy game. The issue for this episode is that we are putting it up against perhaps the drippiest Street Fighter game, maybe the drippiest Capcom game, maybe one of the drippiest games of all time, right? In Third Strike.
In fairness, though, I would say Third Strike has a lot of SNK influence. Like, you look at Remy and you go, oh, that's pretty close to Iori. Or, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of little elements or beats that you're like, oh, I am seeing the artistic influence.
Yeah.
I like Remy. I wish he was in a different game.
Yeah.
You can't have a good charge character in a parry game where you have to press forward.
Well, if you're going to have a good charge character, the answer is play Urien, unfortunately. As an Oro main, I'm also feeling it. But that being said, it's looking at like Rock Howard, for instance. Rock Howard is a better Sean, and he's a better Alex. Alex is not a good box character.
No.
Like, who wants to buy that? I think part of that is also, we didn't say this in the Third Strike, there is a hip-hop element, but I also think there's like a wrestling element. I think there's like a little bit of a NWO,
Definitely.
like Attitude Era element to it.
There are three characters in this game that wear thongs, basically.
This is true.
Urien. Wait, I can do this one. Urien, Elena.
And
Who
Q,
wears a
who
thong?
knows what he's wearing under that
Yeah.
trench coat?
Yeah.
They're probably cute.
It's Gil.
Urien,
It's
Elena,
Gil.
and Gil.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Like, who is wearing like, like basically tidy whities. Like their character design is literally like, what if they wore underwear and were naked?
You know, it's the Illuminati. He can kind of wear what he wants. Ironically,
like,
has nothing to hide.
You know, and I think, like, again, this really can't be overstated. Like, some of these characters are goofy in ways that make them not appealing. Like, if you showed me Urian's character design, I would be like, that guy isn't allowed within 1,000 feet of a school.
Like, yes, goofy, but also man in business suit who rips it off and is only wearing a thong. There's something very interesting about that, goofy or not.
Listen, that says a lot about him, and I appreciate how much character they're delivering, but also, like, and I think this is the other thing, right? Like, Capcom can have some really drippy character designs. SNK does it with really simple stuff.
Yes.
100%.
Like we put a jacket on this dude, and he's the coolest motherfucker you've ever seen.
I will say, like, give someone who knows nothing about these games 2 screenshots side by side, and you say one game is called Street Fighter, they're pointing at Garou every time.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Like, that's a Street Fighter.
On the
why not, right?
I love the Garou roster. I love Freeman. Freeman's so cool. I played against him yesterday by Dark, one of the Golden Weeklies people. It was so much fun to see him play. And I will say also, to give another rose, Garou is way more balanced. And I don't think it matters so much because of what we've said with the universal mechanics, and like it kind of doesn't matter when you're a lower level player, but it is nice to be able to see when I watched like Garou high competitive play that there was variety, and it wasn't necessarily always the same.
There's not a Chun-Li who's playing their own game.
Right. There's a lot of very clear top tiers in Garou, like, you know, Kevin, B, Jenny, Marco, and probably Terry in there as well. Or sorry, Kushnud, but not Marco. I forgot about the translation in this one. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, the guy's name is Marco Rodriguez in Japanese, and they changed it to Kushnud Butt, and it gave him an Urdu name in the American version. And then it's back to Marco in City of the Wolves. But
I mean, as it should be.
Yes, Marco, a little bit of a stronger name for the American audience. But yeah, I think you're right that while there are definitive top tiers, it feels much less spaced out. Like Third Strike, we've got, you know, Q next to Chun-Li.
Yeah. And from like a single player perspective, if you do the arcade mode of Garou, each stage is like each character is introduced with their stage with these really great like 2D animated cutscenes. Like you see Hokutomaru messing around in Second Southtown's equivalent of Times Square and things like that. And when you get to like the final bosses, Grant and Kane, each character has unique dialogue and interactions with them outside of just like their ending like cutscene thing. It's a very good like single player experience, I feel, compared to like Third Strike, which is really just the ladder and a versus mode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and every time I'm playing arcade mode, I just stop when I get to Gil.
Yeah, because it's miserable, right?
Yeah, it's like I'm not playing Third Strike anymore. This is some weird boss rush thing.
I beat Gil with Q, and that is my achievement for this episode.
There you go.
Proud of you, buddy.
There you go. I also like how things end with a lot more of these characters in Garou than in Third Strike. Third Strike's kind of just like, I don't know what's gonna happen with some of these characters. Very like blasé in some ways, I mean, and it makes sense like 20 years later how you haven't seen half of them, or like a quarter of them, I would say. Whereas here in Garou, like seeing Gato go blind at the end of his is like crazy. Like, and there's a cliffhanger with his father. Like stuff like that is super interesting. Or Rock Howard. Rock Howard has like a much clearer like plot twist than Alex, where it's like Alex is just like, I'm gonna be a better fighter, and it's like, all right, whatever, dude.
Yeah. I think it's also like, and this is just a knock on Street Fighter in general, right? Like, we can talk about how goofy fighting game lore is, but like, there are people who care about the Tekken story. There are people who care about the Guilty Gear story. I'm one of them. There are people who care about SNK storylines. Nobody on this earth who isn't in a mental institution cares about the Street Fighter story or could tell you anything. Abigail's story in Street Fighter V is that he is a car. Like, there is no internal consistency. There is no thought between, like, how do we take these characters that we've designed and make them hit each other?
Yes.
Right? And,
I do say the best thing Street Fighter has done for quote-unquote story is not even the story, it's small character interactions like in Street Fighter 6 with the text messages.
Yeah.
That gave more character to a lot of these characters than the last like 30 years of their games. When you have Ryu texting you that you are his master because you're showing him how to use a cell phone, and then he can't stop sending emojis. Like, that does a lot for that character. But that has nothing to do with the ongoing arc and story of Street Fighter, because as Will said, it's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
It's like Street Fighter is the thing that people think every other like fighting game story is.
It's
Yeah.
all bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just nonsense.
But it's Jury texting you, please click on this link.
It's all feet at the end of the day.
If Garou did get like a shiny new anniversary re-release, which I'm not really sure SNK really has precedence for doing, you know, I would want it to have one, functional lobbies. We talked about that when we were doing casuals in Garou. But two, I think a second pass at like localization would help a lot. Because even though I was just praising the arcade mode, there are some weird turns of phrase there. Like Rock's ending is he effectively defects to go with Kane to like fulfill the will of Geese or whatever. And Terry shows up to be like, Rock, where are you going? And Kane says, sorry, Blondie, he's with me now. Sad day, wolf boy. It's like, what an odd thing to say.
To be fair, that's pretty devastating.
That's oof.
Yeah, if somebody hits you with that, like, it's time to just, go home and be a family man. Like,
someone calls me Wolf Boy, I'm going home.
I wanted to, because I wasn't sure we would get to it. I need to mention the top system. I like the top system. I think it's really cool. Go ahead.
I like the top system. I feel like I need to get a better understanding of, from like the pro perspective of like, I don't know, the strategy of where you put it.
I'm under the impression, because I've looked at some Kane stuff. His name is Kine, but I'm gonna call him Kane. Ignore what I'm saying here. But Kane's meta is you put it near either the mid or the bottom. But for most people, you would put it either at the top or the middle. Most people don't put it at the bottom.
All right, bro. To give you your own pop quiz, what does top stand for?
I have no idea.
Oh, jeez.
Well, you know.
No, I don't. Not off the top of my head.
It is tactical offense position.
Of course.
Which actually kind of makes sense. But yeah, just to clue people in, I don't know any of this. I'm on the super combo for Garou. But it enhances damage to all of your attacks. There's a faster meter build, slower regeneration of your health bar, and then also, of course, your top special move becomes available. So you choose 1/3 of your life bar, and whenever you're in that particular third, you get those different effects added.
Yes, and City of the Wolves has a very similar system.
Yes. And if you pick somewhere like towards the top or middle, like we said with Just Defense gives you life back. So you can actually get back into your top if you just defend right.
Cool.
I like Garou a lot. I mean, I think it's clear Third Strike wins. This didn't start out as a versus match. But that being said, there's a lot to see that's special about Garou. And this is a beloved game to many.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about two excellent games.
I would take Garou over most fighting games, to be fair.
I would too. 100%.
I would say a big part of the reason Garou didn't end up on our IGN list is just enough of us weren't familiar enough to speak intelligently on it. But I know the place it holds for people and the amount of time I've spent with it. I kind of want to go back and keep playing, even though, there's, no one online hardly when you're playing. Just the mechanics behind it, like canceling specials into supers, that's just a lot of fun to do.
I personally feel that it's really damn close for me, actually, in terms of like which ones I like to like pick up and play and go through the arcade and do versus matches with. Third Strike honestly only wins out because I like the diversity of its roster so much.
I think I was when we made that IGN list to Ronnie's point, like we couldn't put Garou on it because not enough people had played it. I advocated for it pretty heavily at the time, but like I think the beautiful thing about them is they're both like, I think if you made a top 10 of like legitimately all time, like these are the fighting games you really have to play to understand what the genre is, right? Like, or just like a top 10 greatest, like Garou's on there, Third Strike is on there, right? They have to be, but they're both very different games in a way that I think like some people are gonna be like, that's kind of a cop out, and it's like, no, I mean, genuinely, like if the road splits at Third Strike and Garou, you can see where the genre is today. right? You can see which games took which road. And I think that's really cool, and that's what makes them really unique. I think, like if you were gonna, put a gun to my head and be like, well, which one should I play? I'd be like, well, it depends on what you want. If you want a more systems heavy game, play Garou. If you want a game that has like sauce on top of sauce, play Garou. If you want a game that is gonna let you have those really cool moments of like, I'm dead. Oh wait, no, I'm not. I'm a genius. You're dead, actually. Play Third Strike. And that's the difference, right? Like, and I think that kind of goes into their design standpoint. Like, the biggest thing in Third Strike is a defensive mechanic. The biggest thing in Garou is offense.
Yep.
Yeah, if Garou is call an ambulance, Third Strike is call an ambulance, but not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good examples to showcase how offensive heavy Garou is. I noticed this because I'm a zoner, so you notice these things. The stages are really small. It's very easy to get walked into a corner. And also, because of the just defense being slightly easier than parry and healing, I gotta be real fucking careful about throwing a fucking fireball. I play both Marco and Kane, and I have to be way more deliberate. And in Third Strike, parry does neutralize a lot, but like, you could throw out a fireball and it might hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the other thing, right, is like, again, like, you can't talk about the genre without talking about either one of them. Like, you can trace back so much of what Guilty Gear is to Fatal Fury, and you can trace back everything to Street Fighter, right? But the genre owes so much to both these games. And it's funny that they came out in the same year, doing a lot of the same things in terms of, we're going to add a new cast, we're going to beautifully animate this.
We're going to have a pair of Asian twins. We're going to have a protege character that's demonstrably worse than the rest of the cast. There's an Illuminati run by two brothers.
To be fair, Sean used to be very good and then got nerfed into the ground for Third Strike.
Yeah, Sean in Second Impact is top tier.
That's true. And ironically, right, these games are not going to be appreciated in their time.
Yeah.
But there is no way to talk about the genre without talking about them, right? And the fact that these games are still, the fact that you could go to EVO this year and play Third Strike, and the fact that we're getting a new Fatal Fury game, I think says a lot about, what the reputation of these games has become, and deservedly. Sometimes things don't get recognized in their time, but you would be a crazy person to say that they're not good, that they're not influential, and I think when you put them head to head, like, yeah, you could pick a winner, but the reality is that we got both these games in a year and they both had this much impact is kind of an insane thing on the level of like, isn't it nice that someone was recording the Daigo parry? Like,
yeah.
And I would recommend, there's also, between characters making fun of each other, between Rio and Dan and stuff like that, there's a lot of cross-pollination between these games. There's a history of admiration and bad blood both.
We didn't even say, but like the origins are quite literally intertwined.
So I would, someone who's much more intelligent than me, Matt McMuscles, I'd recommend watching his YouTube videos on them. Both the Third Strike, what happened, and he has a whole retrospective on the Fatal Fury series and things like that. But the history behind both of these companies and how they work together, and recently how they work together now, is just super fascinating.
I feel like this is winding down. I feel like this was a good conversation. Any final thoughts? I think those were pretty...
I think, for as much as we put Third Strike on a pedestal, I do want to reinforce that, like, Garou made me more playing Garou for this episode made me more excited for Garou coming out next year, City of the Wolves. And also, I just went and reinstalled King of Fighters 13.
There you go.
And you know what? It's a good game. I'll say that.
And it has nothing to do with anything, but I think Street Fighter 6 is kind of not doing we're doing Third Strike very well. Like, it's not being a really good spiritual successor, whereas I think City of the Wolves is like seriously looking at Garou for influences and like showcasing what was special about it.
Yeah, six is something very different despite the initial hip hop aesthetic.
I think it's a callback, but I don't think it's very interested in being like a sequel to Third Strike in the way that like City of the Wolves is very much wants to be a sequel to Garou, like in a way that is good, right? And that's not to like dunk on Street Fighter 6 or whatever. Like, it's it's a good game, but like it's interested in doing a different thing. And I think for me, if I had to like sum up final thoughts, it is great to live in a second renaissance, is what I'm going to call it, because that's where we are. You know, for a long time, like a lot of the big names in this genre went away, and several of them have never come back. But man, we live in an era where we're getting Street Fighter games every console generation, where Tekken never stopped, where we're getting a new Garou, where Guilty Gear got bought back from freaking Sega Sammy and Arxis was allowed to cook, and then it made a lot of money. You know, where Marvel vs. Capcom is getting a re-release. Like, how blessed are we as fans of this genre to live right now with rollback and all of this?
And for new players, I always say, if anyone ever asks me, I always say the best fighting game to play is one with people playing it like right now. And most of the time that means a new release, but also the GOATs or great games are played by dedicated communities. And that's super important to say. And you can see that with Garou and Third Strike, to where it could bring people to Evo. It brought me to Evo, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing I would add to that is, like, you know, the best time to start playing fighting games was before you listen to this podcast, and the second best time is right now. So if you look at, you know, if you come into this podcast and you're like, man, Third Strike looks really cool, go get Fightcade, go get a copy of the 30th anniversary edition and play Third Strike. You can buy Garou on Steam, you know, or basically on any platform. SNK's been really great about re-releases, but this stuff is accessible now. There's a ton of resources to help you learn it. And the best thing is that these scenes are alive. They're well. 1,000 people came to Evo to play Third Strike. That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 people playing Third Strike on Fightcade the other day.
I'm sure.
Yep.
It's probably the same guys.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you like, and we started this as a head-to-head. I could not pick one. If you were like, well, you only get to play one for the rest of your life. I do think it's worth noting that, again, you know, for the record, like, Third Strike is where it is because someone filmed Daigo Umehara play Justin Wong. And a lot of the trajectory of history for these games is dependent on stuff that is so far out of the control of the developers or anything like that, or the community initially, that these organic moments just happen, and that's what makes fighting games great. Right?
Guys, I have to complain about something. I totally forgot. Because I think we're going to lead to a tie here, or maybe a slight edge to Third Strike. I fucking hate how Third Strike does ties.
Go on.
Had a tie game in Third Strike.
Okay, so a tie game in Third Strike basically has 3 NPCs come out, and it's like a vote. They're judges. They're female NPC judges. And it's based on your letter grade.
What? I have never seen this.
I would be so angry.
It kind of doesn't matter, because what is the likelihood of a tie? I have seen essays about it, people upset about it, very intrigued, because like that stuff's interesting.
What is the backstory for those 3 female NPCs?
They alternate, and one of them is playable in Street Fighter V. It's the Ice Lady. Whatever.
Okay.
Colin, I think is her name. Yes.
The white lady normals lady.
The white, yes. They also get to judge your existence.
The Council of White Women, they determine the normals.
Yes.
You were on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of white woman.
Bummer.
Oh, man.
Is that in Bison?
Yeah. Listen, Bison wanted to be a white woman so bad that he, like, genetically engineered a cadre of white women to do his bidding. He wanted white woman normals that badly.
Will, pop quiz, name all of his white women.
I think
there's the one with the laptop.
Listen, I think that for me, that the knowledge of Street Fighter lore begins and ends with Cammy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
good start.
All right, let's do some plug-in. Ronny, it's your first time on the cast. We'll let you plug first. Anything you've done recently that you want eyeballs on?
Yeah, I guess, as it makes sense for this episode, I filmed a bunch of Evo interviews with Mitchell Saltzman when we were at the convention. If you want to see Shuhei Matsumoto, producer of Street Fighter, talk about the upcoming Marvel vs. Capcom collection, and also some Street Fighter 6 and SNK characters being added to Street Fighter 6. There's that interview. We also interviewed Michael Murray, Nakatsu, and Harada for Tekken 8, talking about the future of that series, about a 20-minute interview. And then also the producer for Guilty Gear Strive, Ken Miyauchi. Those are all some really cool things we got to do, and I would really like more people to watch them.
Will?
That is awesome. Yep, Will?
So I've been working on a ton of things recently, but I'm very proud of the 2XKO preview on IGN. If you were interested in that game, I encourage you to watch it. We've got some really great gameplay there from myself, Ronnie, Mitch Salzman, and Apology Man. I'm very proud of that write-up. It's done pretty well with FGC people who I have talked to about it. And if you're looking for something that's not fighting game related, I wrote about EDF6 for Shack News, which, like Street Fighter, is goofy as hell and definitely worthy of your time. So check those out.
All right.
Murph, what is the next game we're playing?
We're going back to space. We're going back to SNESquels. We are on the hunt for little baby aliens taken by big purple dragon aliens. We are going to be talking.
The last Metroid is in captivity. Yes.
Yeah. We are going to be talking about Super Metroid
with a guest that these people are familiar with, Brian. So that'll be super exciting.
Who?
Brian.
I'm just kidding. Super Metroid tied with Final Fantasy III for the best title reveal of all time.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. He's fast.
Both of them scared me as a child.
Is that the metric?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
If it scares me as a child, it's wonderful now.
I need. What if it scares you as an adult?
Also good, but childhood fear is more primal.
That is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My childhood nightmare. We're ending the podcast now. It's done. Was a bunch of my loved ones and neighbors turning into monkey faces, chimpanzee faces.
Huh.
Speaking of primal.
That's yeah. Listen, the beautiful thing about childhood nightmares is they don't make sense. Then you get to be an adult and you're like, it's not that scary.
Yeah.
Eat that thing up.
Yeah.
I had a nightmare.
Silly.
I had a nightmare last night that I was drafted by the New England Patriots.
Okay, I want to see if Ronnie can actually do this. Ronnie,
oh god,
name every third strike character.
Can someone tell me how many there are first?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
20. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Okay,
bro,
I was
cut
feeling
this out if it's bad radio.
until you got past 16.
I'm putting this after the outro.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Ryu, Ken, Sean, Chun-Li, Makoto, Yun, Yang, Dudley, Necro, Hugo, Urien, 12, Q. How many are left?
7.
7.
Akuma. Now rubber meets the road here. Does Gil count?
Gil counts.
Okay.
5 more.
Oh geez, 5 more. I can do this. Who did I not say?
That's the hard part.
Here,
Yeah,
I have a Google document open right. Actually, I will just open a new one. It's a good thing you're cutting this around, bro. This is gonna be super awkward.
Good. Don't worry about it.
All right, so say the guys you're getting. I'm writing them down as we do this.
Okay.
So Ryu, Ken, obviously.
Ryu, Ken, Sean, Akuma, the Shotos.
Okay.
Chun-Li,
Okay.
Yun,
Yep.
Yang,
Yep.
Gil,
Yep.
Dudley.
Yep.
Did I say Makoto?
No.
Hugo,
Okay.
Necro,
Yeah.
12.
Uh-huh.
I think this is where I stopped last time.
I think this is where you stopped last time. I'm gonna put this into a numbered list so we can see how many you have. You have 13 right now.
Only 13?
Yep.
That's worse than last time.
I have not been keeping up. I think I got some.
Okay, so
I
right now
know
we
who
have.
he's missing.
You're
I
in.
know who you're in. Yep, you're in is one of them.
Oh, this is so frustrating. I was sure I could do this.
I will read the list to you. Okay.
Okay.
Ryu, Ken, Sean, Akuma, Chun-Li, Yoon, Yang, Gil, Dudley, Makoto, Hugo, Necro, 12, and you're in.
Alex.
I know what you're missing. Yes.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you don't get Alex, bro's gonna be
Well,
upset.
There's others as well.
quote unquote the main character, but you know.
Yeah.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah. I mean, I could think about it and probably get it, but I'll call it there. I don't want to leave y'all hanging.
There's Ibuki as well.
Ibuki, there you go.
And
Ibuki,
Remy.
Elena, Remy.
Yep.
Necro.
Mm-hmm.
I said Necro.
He did say Necro.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you did. Okay, so Ibuki, Elena, Remy, Oro. You did not name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I should have caught that one.
Yeah.
And Q.
I said Q the first time, but not the second time. Dang it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you got 16. You got 16.
Ibuki, Elena, Oro, I think were the three that I just could not bring to mind. And
There's a
I love
lot
all
of-
three of those characters.
We await your return, warrior.